everyone, and thank you for joining us again on the Seafood Matters podcast. In order to help our podcast series, please press subscribe and share it with family and friends. Our guest today needs no introduction. Welcome, Cyrus Todiwala, OBE DL, an Indian chef, proprietor of London's Café Spice Namasté, and a celebrity chef and an absolute master in the use of spices. Welcome, Cyrus. Great to see you.
Welcome. Thank you, Chef. Thanks for having me on the program.
Thank you. You're a great asset to our program. If I could start by, when growing up, did you ever take for granted how fresh and diverse the seafood was? How does it compare to what's available in the UK now when you're brought up in India, I believe?
So, grew up in India, of course, till I came here in my 30s. You took everything for granted. You're absolutely right, Chef. We took it for granted. You went to the market, you saw the fish, you liked it, you bought it, and that was it. Nobody bothered. For many years, till I, of course, started to think about sustainability during my working days in Goa. Until then, we took everything for granted. Today, of course, one has to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more thoughtful. And I think some of us are very privileged to understand that there is a definite need for us to not take all marine life for granted. And that there is a lot out there that we need to learn, we need to share, and we need to make sure that the youngsters in our country, growing up, understand where they're going and where it may lead to if we're all not careful.
That's powerful
So
words.
it's just one of those things, yeah.
It's powerful words, and obviously you got the principle, lead by example.
You have to lead by example. I mean, I'm telling you about my days when in Goa, when I was there, things were really, really cheap. To give you an example, we used to have large green lip mussels in Goa. Large in a sense, maybe 4 inches long, really big like that. And I used to pay just 10 rupees 100. That means for in today's money, I would have got 1,000 for a pound. Waters were clean, unpolluted. You could eat the mussels absolutely raw. They came straight to you. Today, the waters in Goa have been poisoned. The Goa government has allowed casinos to be berthed off the coast, and they are polluting the waters, dumping all the rubbish into the sea. And you would not want to eat those mussels. And that is because they are still taking things for granted. And they are not realizing how much damage it is causing. So while I was there, I joined, the chief minister of Goa had asked me to join his committee on whatever we could do, because I had started to do some conservation on the olive Riley turtles, for example. I read a report only yesterday that olive Riley turtles are being washed up dead onto the beaches, dead by their hundreds. What is killing them? When they cut the guts open, they're full of plastic. Again, we've taken it for granted. That led to other things, because all of a sudden you realize that this beautiful, very slow-moving mammal called the dugong, which is very similar to the manatee of America, was being killed and sold as pork meat, because the dugong was protected, but to kill it and to cut it, and because of the blubber, it looked like pork almost. And we had to bring something into effect to prevent it even further from entering the markets. And that's when I got more and more involved in conservation. And then a rule was passed about the kind of nets that the fishermen used. Because in India, even so, everything can be caught in the same net. It doesn't necessarily mean that different nets are added and you haul in tons of fish that are not ever going to be sold. And those are waste. And that was happening then. We tried to bring in a rule where the weave had to be bigger so you could catch only bigger fish and the smaller ones could escape from the mesh and grow bigger. So from the fishermen, because they always said there's plenty, don't worry about this, nothing's ever going to happen. Our oceans will never get depleted. Today, when we go back to India, and we came back only 3 weeks ago, the fish that we were so used to eating regularly today is only as big as my palm and still coming into the market. So there is no one allowing them to grow even further. And you can't get them any bigger because it's just not being allowed to grow. And I think people are still not understanding it. So there's lots taking for granted. And we are just not giving our ocean time to recoup, to recover, and to refresh itself.
Is there any scientific studies done on this? Because what we find up here, some scientists reckon that we increase the mesh size to let small fish escape, but all it does is makes more fish competing for the available food.
This is going back to, and you will recollect this, when all of a sudden cod fishing was banned for a few years. And I'm going back about 20 years from now. I was doing a little bit more understanding about this when I started to look deeper into marine conservation and what was being discovered. And this is the pity that we have today, because we insist on eating only a very small variety of fish from our ocean. So cod was being overfished, cod was being overconsumed. As a result, the predator category of cod dropped. So when you have a predator, you got, for example, you got the killer whale, you got the big sharks, and then you come down the big tunas, etc., etc., etc. And the cod is a predator. The cod is a predator for smaller fish like whiting and pollock and other fish. Now, what was happening because of the overfishing of cod, but no consumption of pollock, no consumption of whiting, no consumption of the Atlantic, what's the other fish that we have? I keep forgetting certain names. And because they were not being consumed, the cod became the victim rather than the one that was eating those fish. So the tables were reversed completely. Now the whiting and the pollock were eating the seedlings of the cod. As a result, we had a massive, massive shortage of cod, which was just not being allowed to grow or not allowed to develop. When you look at fishing nets, so yes, there is one level of truth in that. But the other thing also exists, that when the net is pulling the fish in, the small ones are getting crushed anyway. A lot of the fish is getting crushed in any case. And sometimes the fishermen, out of sheer fear, are dumping dead fish back into the sea. So whether that is detrimental or not detrimental is something that scientists need to prove and maybe advise the politicians on what steps that needs to be taken. The Norwegians have a better understanding of that than we do here sometimes. But the most important message to us all is that in Britain we need to learn to eat a wider choice of marine species. We have over 250 species around our coastal waters. We only consume a handful of those. And I think that's where the greatest challenge remains.
I completely agree with that. We have a fishery that is very multi-species.
Yes. But if you look at all those species coming in, people will still pick and choose the ones they want to eat only.
Well,
and that's where the trouble starts.
I think it's maybe better in the hospitality industry with chefs, but with our fish and chip shops, it's cod in England, haddock in Scotland, and that's your lot.
Precisely, chef. Precisely. And it's not just only the chefs, and it's the public we need to educate, but we need to start in the schools educating. If schools served a wider choice of cheaper fish varieties, the nutrition from fish is amazing. It's very, very, very nutritionally balanced. And if they are given fish that are of a lesser known breed or variety, they will get used to eating different types of fish. And the education needs to start at that level. By the time you're adults, your brains are set, your habits are set, so many things are set. It's very difficult to sometimes move people from thinking whether they should change or not change. People are afraid to try different things. We do seafood menus, and for raising money for various charities, and you'll be surprised. The moment they read the menu, oh, I don't eat this, I don't eat that, I don't eat that, I don't eat that. Why? Try it. No, I don't think I like the taste. So there is a lot of education required. Scientific evidence is one thing, as you know. You're a friend of so many fishermen, being on Scrapster Harbor for so many years, that the scientists say one thing, but the fishermen know something else. They are out there in the sea day in and day out, and they know what's happening. Maybe we need to have the fishermen have a louder voice in creating opinion.
When you say that, Cyrus, I was doing a podcast with he's a good friend of mine now. He's a fisheries scientist in Iceland. He goes back when the scientists in Iceland used to go out and to do their surveys. They would go on board trawlers and go out with the fishermen and do their studies. Then they decided they would get nice new ships and do that work themselves. So they would be concentrating on doing all the scientific studies themselves. And this scientist that I was talking about, Jon Christensen, he feels that that was the biggest mistake ever made in Iceland, because what it actually did, it took scientists and fishermen apart.
Yes.
And they weren't speaking.
And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying, which is why people are not learning enough.
Yeah.
And that is why you need people like your good friend, Mr. Amity Fish, to talk more.
Well, he's got so much passion as well as the knowledge.
Oh, he's got so much passion. He was a celebrity as one of the trawlermen, but he represents Scotland in various shows all over the world. But people like that need to speak more.
You obviously have had an interest in going back, involvement in conservation for a long time, because I believe you were your honorary wildlife warden for the state, and now you're in the UK and you're still very much up with it.
Well, I was appointed as the first honorary wildlife warden in the state of Goa by the chief minister, because I was very passionate about certain kinds of destruction and how we could protect species. Because in the estuaries, when they overfish brackish water prawns, or they overfish some of the lovely fish that grow in these waters, it affects not just the sea marine life, it affects the birds, the migratory birds, which fly all the way from Siberia. They used to come all the way to South Goa, South India, to avoid the bitter cold of Siberia. And their diet used to be on the water. And you're taking away their diet. They needed clams, they needed mussels, they needed the little fish. And by overfishing those birds started to look for other places to settle in. So we managed even then to get what was called a water tank. It was nothing but a big pool of brackish spring water. So the water was under the ground but came from the sea, and it filtered into a large lake. And with a lot of pressure, we managed to earmark that as a protected piece of land. And I was very pleased to hear that the birds are still coming there during winter. So Indian winter very mild, Siberian winter very cold. And I think those are the things that unless we have foresight and vision and think that we can manage, we cannot manage these things. And there are some good people doing amazing amounts of work, but it's so difficult to educate a people that are so used to just harvesting and grabbing. I mean, there are islands just next to Bombay where loads of the the green turtles used to migrate and lay eggs, but not a single egg was allowed to be hatched. Very few mothers made it back into the sea. The locals would grab the eggs, grab the turtle, kill it, cook it, take all the eggs away, and cook them. And this was an accepted norm. So this is only education, slowly, that can filter and educate people to understand that these are not done. And unfortunately, across Southeast Asia, there is a lack of education, and it needs a continuous focus to tell people to change. Whereas here, we have people who are more receptive, people are more understanding, and yet we have an issue. So, going back, for example, when you look at the lobster population of the United Kingdom, when the first lobster hatchery was established, the fishermen were not convinced that that would work. But a very few managed to give females with rows attached to the hatchery. Very soon, 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the line, they suddenly realized that lobster stocks were coming back. The spiny lobster has come back to UK waters only because of the restrictions applied and to allow the species to rebreed again. So today now we got spiny lobster coming back. It's a great thing to have these come back in the water. The Scottish lobster is preserved, the Cornish lobster is preserved, and it's only with the understanding and constant follow-up that things can succeed.
Your passion is you obviously study a lot and listen a lot before you've got all that knowledge, considering the fact with all this, you're actually a chef in the middle of London. It's impressive.
Yes. Well, we would have loved to move to Scotland, but we had no chance. Tell me. Sorry, chef.
What is your views on consumer awareness and the balance between demand and conservation?
Oh, that's a tough question. Consumer awareness is there. I know that the Marine Conservation Society has got its followers and has also got people who oppose what they do to a degree, and they are not always on the right side of the fishermen. But at least the Good Fish Guide, which I promote to every single person, whoever I meet and wherever I do my classes or I talk to people, I ask them to download the Marine Conservation Society Good Fish Guide onto their telephones. Because what it does, it gives you a wide range of British seafood. On top of that, it tells you the seasonality. It tells you about what fish to not eat. For example, the Dover sole will now go into rowing. So the sole will start producing roes in March, April, I think is the season now. Should we be eating Dover sole or should we allow them to breed? Should we allow them to spawn? And I think these are information bits that need to be more public. They need to go out wider to the people. Please be careful at this time of the year. This kind of fish are spawning at the moment. It's great to eat cod roe because there's plenty of cod roe mostly available. But by having vast quantities of cod roe, what are we actually doing? Are we decimating the breed? Are we damaging the supplies? Are we going to have a long-term detrimental effect? I think this kind of information people need to give to consumers. And supermarkets can play a very, very important role in that because unfortunately, they do have a very important tool in their hands, which is education. They can educate. So it's a very tough balance. Consumer awareness is extremely important. Again, the word sustainability, chef, is a very misunderstood terminology. People think that if I do this, I am sustainable. If I do that, I'm sustainable. But what exactly is sustainability? Do we actually understand the core meaning of the word sustainability? And there are lots of meaningless things thrown everywhere. That I am being carbon neutral, I am being this positive, that positive. That is not really sustainability. Sustainability is to understand. So I'll give you a small example. When I came up to your place, I was actually acting on behalf of His Majesty's then the Mutton Renaissance movement. And I went all the way up to the island of North Ronaldsay, which is from you across to Orkney and then by a little flight to North Ronaldsay. His major concern was, will that community thrive or die? Now, that also is sustainability. how do you allow a small group of people eking out a living from a wild sheep and whatever little marine resource they have got to actually ensure that they will survive into the next century or the century after that or whatever it is? And that again is sustainability. So, what has to be put into place to manage our resources at the same time to educate people? I mean, lots of stories keep coming out, and you're into the Scottish lochs, and salmon farming may have been overly subscribed. They still say it is sustainably bred, but is it having a detrimental effect on the waters? Is it having an effect on the fish that we eat or the livestock or the wild stock? And I think information needs to be more clear. It needs to be more clear. People are accepting now. People are more understanding. And I think if better information is given in small snippets, you don't have to give a lot of jargon. That's not what people want. They just want small bits of good information.
One of the things that I often felt when I had my restaurant, Scrabster, was sustainability. And we worked hard at sustainability. We had awards, the UK Sustainable Restaurant of the Year. I actually felt, Cyrus, the word sustainability was the most abused word in the English language.
Absolutely agree with you. That's my view as well. It's very abused. And it's abused because it's become fashionable. And it's abused because people think if I use the word, I am safe and sound. But it's not. It's not that. On the coast of Hastings, on the southern eastern tip of Britain, they had the largest, what do you call it, dry beach fishing fleet. And the boats are hauled up by chain, whatever you call that. Yes? Now, they at one time had 200 boats going out. They've been decimated in their 20s or 30s. Why? So again, there are issues there that people have not been able to figure out. And the landings are much less. And entire community of fisher folk whose livelihood depended on the sea have perished. They moved into different things, or they find it difficult to move into different things. Again, that is sustainability. That should have been understood better, and we should have provided them with better amenities to survive, rather than the imposition of very heavy penalties on catching one wrong fish. So we were interviewing one fisherman who had 2 extra cod on his boat, which he brought in to land, because he didn't want to throw it out. He was fined £10,000.
Wow.
Because it was not his license to catch that fish. But he says it came in my net. What am I supposed to do? And this is where sometimes there's a confusion between law, between sustainability, between common sense, and between understanding our seas and making it more easy for people to defragment it and make it accessible for the average human being to understand.
Do you see a role that chefs and consumers can contribute?
Chefs can contribute to everything, sir. Let me give you a small story. We had a delegation that came from India that was suing a large fertilizer company at The Hague in Holland for decimating the land in India by giving unnecessary, very heavy fertilizers to poor farmers and then drawing them into a web of never being able to escape from it. And this lady in charge of that committee was talking to me, and she asked me, what do you think of sustainability? I said, Madam, can you defragment that one word and tell me in simplistic terms in your language what you mean by sustainability and what I should answer? She said, in my opinion, chefs are the most powerful people in the world to make change if they want to make change. If you tell the world that I will not buy crops that are grown with heavy fertilizers and that have lots of added chemicals into it, the farming community will have to adapt. The same way, she said, when it comes to marine conservation, if chefs take it upon themselves to promote the seafood, that is what we need to be eating, then automatically we will create a process of education that people will then understand and follow and learn to appreciate. And she gave me that little small phrase that stuck in my brain, that we have the power but we do nothing about it, because we pander to perception, we pander to public perception, we give them what they want. And that is the difference between someone like you who worked on that jetty and who got his catch straight from the boat into his restaurant, and you could give anything that came into land from your restaurant and your customers would have it, to chefs who demand a certain kind of fish throughout the year, be it seasonal or be it non-seasonal. Why do we demand a halibut that must be 15 kilos in size, or a turbot that needs to be 8 kilos in size? Why can not be of different sizes? Is it only because we are charging certain kind of money that we need to cut a certain kind of piece because my recipe cannot adapt to something else which is not of the right size? And I think once we get that into our heads and we start to teach our people and talk to them more about it, and that was done 40, 50 years ago, chef, you will know it was done many, many years ago because you've been on the circuit for many, many years. But we have come away from that. We have moved away from that into getting things that are demanded throughout the year because of its demand from the public.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the way I felt I was trying to be guided by that, I used to have a rule of thumb when I had the restaurant. Maybe sounds a bit arrogant, but it was never meant in an arrogant way. Nobody could pre-order, and people would maybe phone and say, look, we're coming to your restaurant next week. What's the menu? The market or the boat landing on the day decided my menu, nothing else.
Precisely. And that's how it ought to be. I give them the best, I give them the freshest, and that's what you had the benefit of doing.
Definitely.
And I think that's the way it should be. Yeah.
How do you integrate seafood and sustainable seafood into your menu at Café Spice Namasté and your other establishments?
So at the moment, we have narrowed back to just one restaurant. It was very difficult in today's world to manage 5. And then we narrowed back. The difficulty that we face today is how do we source? And I've worked quite a lot with your good friend, Mr. Mike Warner. Mike, I find, is like an encyclopedia of information for me. If I don't understand something, I call Mike. And Mike gives me lots of information. So just at the moment now, last week, he has brought me some prawns which he says are very, very sustainable. And I said, okay, but let me do some more work on it. And then you discover that this community in Madagascar, where these big prawns come from, have actually started to replant mangrove swamps. Now, the swamps were removed, which have devastated the coastline, which have taken away a marine life balance that existed amongst the roots of these plants in shallow waters. So when we try to source, you look at certain badging, certain accreditations. Prawns are one thing that is out of our control sometimes. But you try your best to source prawns that are better accredited. Now, if these prawns are better accredited, because in British waters, we don't get the same prawns that you need. In terms of seafood, the most popular fish across Britain today in restaurants is bass. Now, we don't call wild bass, we don't call bass in the sea bass, because all bass come from the sea. But the terminology used nowadays with sea bass is when it is farmed, it is sea bass. But that perhaps is more sustainable than having fresh bass harvested from the sea, because it could be unseasonal, it could be out of season, and things happen. Trout from Tobermory, for example, or chalk stream, which we use more commonly. because chalk stream I get fresh trout from there, though I prefer the smoked trout coming from Tobermory on the Isle of Mull. But again, it is not just sustainable, the waters are beautiful, waters are clean, pure, and any information that you want on the purity, the clarity, and the way the fish is bred is available to you, and that makes you happy. So you try and introduce something where though we don't have a large seafood variety on our menu these days, we have the advantage of buying stuff that we think is ethically correct. Go as far as that. The rest, of course, when we do dinners now, we'll be doing a couple of dinners to raise money for the Fishermen's Charity with Mike Warner in next month. We are planning a dinner, and I will let him give me whatever he wishes to give me. This year at Pub in the Park, seafood Cornwall, Cornish seafood, is going to give us fish to cook in a pie, so that we are going to promote sustainable seafood by the seafood Cornwall on the menu, to introduce to the people a variety of fish that will come from them, to be promoted and served to the hundreds of people that come to eat there. We do our little bit where we can.
It's come into my mind, are you going to call it sustainable pie or fish pie?
We will call it fish pie, but we call it the Cornish fish pie, so people know it's from Cornwall. And then we'll have a little statement there to say where the fish was and why the fish has come from there, and whether it is sustainable or not sustainable.
That sounds excellent. As a seafood champion, which I certainly people see you as, do you think there's enough done to promote seafood?
No, we are an island nation, surrounded by beautiful waters on all sides. Perhaps out of the many, many countries in the world, we do have cleaner waters than most places have. And we have a lot of harvest going on. But being a seafaring nation to start with, and being an island nation to start with, I do not think we do enough to promote the right balance of seafood. The nutritional information on seafood is very clear. Everybody knows that seafood is easy to digest, easy to acquire, and easy to cook, though people are very scared to cook fish sometimes. The important messages are we actually utilizing what we are harvesting? Clear example, and you know this, if Britain is exporting nearly 50,000 tons of live hen crabs to China in large ships with massive containers on board, with oxygen tanks and fresh water being pumped from the sea into those tanks and filtered out to keep those crabs alive till they reach China. Why is the British public not aware of this? It is going abroad because our profession has spoiled the minds of the British public by serving them only clean, white crab meat. So hen crab, which has a larger percentage of brown meat, is now scoffed at, is not wanted. Some chefs use it to make a little sauce, some put it in a bisque, but it is camouflaged all the time. And we are spending, or China is paying, of course, but 50,000 tons is a lot of our own marine resource is going abroad because we are not eating it. And that is where education comes in, chef. The brown meat is more nutritious, it is better for you, it is easier to digest, and it is packed with flavor. Why cannot more recipes be developed to allow people to be able to eat it, enjoy it, and love it? But we can't do that. You know, you don't get to see spider crabs in our country. The moment a spider crab is harvested, it is put against that scale. The scale tells them whether the crab is big enough to be taken out or thrown back into the sea. And then, before the boat even touches harbor, the crabs are sold to Spain and France and wherever else they go, and Portugal. They are exported straight away. And this is the problem that we face. So we are not educating people enough. We are not, the cost of some seafood is so astronomically high because people want a langoustine, with both its claws and its entire body intact. But there are cripples in the sea. They fight with each other. One claw is broken off, something else is broken off. But the langoustine is still a great fish to eat. It's lovely, the Dublin Bay prawn. But can we serve it on a plate? Will people object to it? No. And these are the things that needs to be more passed on to people and made them aware that this is perfectly all right. That we have fish that we are not eating, that is not being harvested because they want the fish. There is an abundance of certain fish. Ling, for example. Who will eat ling, chef? You put ling on the menu, they won't touch it. Arctic chard, they won't touch. Because it is not in the heads and minds of people. Then unless we start to do more education, unless we start to do more promotion of these marine species, we will not be able to change people's perception. And that's unfortunately what is more and more important. And I think this education must begin in school, begin in all our catering institutes. You see all the colleges across the country, when they are teaching the students about fish, none of these fish are ever presented. And there are 50 colleges across the country. And we know because we run this competition, Zest Quest Asia, when we want teams to produce Asian cuisine and teach them more about Asian food, very little seafood appears on the menu. And what appears is only high quality fish. So it's a whole process. It's an entire process.
I'm with you 100%. And Cyrus, if I could maybe just take you back to the crab. When we had the restaurant, I refused to serve crab claws because, yes, people would like crab claws. I would pick the meat myself and put the brown meat through it because when we talk about sustainability, Cyrus, I also feel that part of sustainability is the restaurant surviving and being sustainable. And we're running businesses. We're running a business. And I would say to customers, look, I'm running a business here. And another way I view conservation, when you mentioned the cod earlier, I would say the chef's responsibility is for sustainability is make sure every single part of that fish is utilized.
Is used. Yes.
The belly, to me, that was my, if I was keeping a piece for myself to have when I was home, it would be the flap on the belly. And
we have a team of people who won't let you serve it.
And I remember a Norwegian from the Lofoten Islands in the restaurant once, and he says an absolute special meal for them is a cod head.
Yes.
And he roasted, and he told me that he says you should start serving it in your restaurant here in Skrabster. He says call it a Viking feast.
And would people eat that?
Unfortunately, I have to be honest and say I have the courage to take it. Locals wouldn't have bought it, but I regret to this day not having done it. I would use the cheeks and tongues and all that and put it in parts. So I think we have the fact that we're running businesses, we owe it to ourselves. And I feel what would be interesting to hear your view on that. But I always found if you just honest people with your customers and I would say to them, look, we're running a business here. We're buying that fish. We have to use every part we can of it.
Yes, you're right. Lots of croquettes on Café Spice special menus. Lots of what we call a patties, potato cake stuffed with fish mince. And where is all that mince coming from? And people love it because it's not in their face sometimes. So we have to use it. Otherwise, where is the money going?
Indeed. What about the importance of choosing sustainable options?
For people?
Yeah.
For customers or for chefs?
For customers.
Customers. I don't know how many restaurants have on their menus to say sustainable options. I don't think we do that as a rule. Perhaps maybe there is a chance for that. And we were talking to some people yesterday about why, for example, lamb is more expensive in our country than it should be. We have so many sheep because the British public has stopped eating offal, for example. But you're paying for it because you buy a whole sheep, and once it's slaughtered, half, not half, but maybe a third, a fourth, or maybe a quarter even is wasted because nobody wants to eat it. We've gone off eating those things. The same applies to fish. It's gone off. If you give people a steak, they're a little bit more skeptical. If you give people a fillet, they are more acceptable to it. And I think it's a whole process. It's a whole process, chef. It needs to be, how would I say, reintroduced. And at the same time, a re-education process needs to happen. And we are at a stage now where it is more important than ever before, because the consumption of seafood in the world may have gone up 500%. And the way the seas are going and the way the pollution takes place and the way the environment is being damaged, I don't know how long fish will become affordable, or it might be just completely priced out of the market sometime. So it's an education. One needs to continue with it. Not every fish can be farmed either, as you know. Very few fish can be farmed. And farming has its own negatives as well as its positives. The negatives, of course, are, again, polluting the waters. The positives are that it's more sustainable, depending on how it is produced. And we are talking about the Atlantic sea trout now. And there are farms in Scotland in certain lochs which are doing an amazing job. But is the sea trout popular as compared to the salmon or as compared to the other trouts? It is probably not. But it's a great fish, it's great food, and it adapts very well to spicing as opposed to salmon. It has more acceptability as a flesh for an Indian chef than salmon does. But again, you put it on the menu and you put salmon along with it, and everybody will go for salmon. So it's again education.
Not me. I would have sea trout before salmon.
You're a different chef. You grew up and you lived, ate, breathed the sea. I know I would never step into your kitchen again in the month of November because everything in my body froze with your kitchen door wide open. But I saw those beautiful scallops that you had. I mean, you had the whole world at your feet. Imagine those trawlers bringing stuff in that is, for a chef, just a dream to have hold of.
Yeah. I felt very privileged, and people would say your suppliers. To me, I had the best, most reliable suppliers in the food industry, fishermen.
Yes, absolutely. And passionate. They would open the gills and show you the gill, and it's still sticky, and the mucus is still alive, and there's not a single smell coming out of that fish.
That's right.
Because you got it fresher than fresh.
Yeah. I very often did talks and demonstrations in some of the local schools. And what I would always do, I would take a whole fish and I'd run my finger down the fish and then put it in my mouth and suck my finger. And the children were just absolutely horrid, and you would hear them saying, "Oh, look what he's just done! Look what," and they'd be screwing their faces up in disgust. And I said, "Look, I know exactly what I've just done. This is the natural slime on that fish preserves itself, and nature looks after it." I said, "Where you go to some of the fast food outlets, I would never put anything in my mouth from there, but I'm perfectly comfortable doing it with this fish today.
And raw, straight out of the sea. Yes.
Yeah,
But that's education again. And many of those children would have kept it in their minds. They would have kept
possibly,
it in their
yeah.
minds. Yes, they would have. So you affect people that will then grow up and remember what you did. Sometimes we just say small things and it has a big impact on certain people, and the right impact.
If you had a seafood campaign, what message would you find the hardest? Or push the hardest, sorry. What message would you push the hardest if you had your own seafood campaign?
I would say try. I would love to have a program going across the country, seafood locally, and just demonstrating to people at the docks, at the harbor, and making them taste seafood that they're not used to eating. You know, we used to have a great seafood festival in Tarbert many years ago. And I did it for several years in Tarbert. And we always asked for fish that I had never seen before. I used to tell them, bring me fish that I don't know. And let's see what we can cook with it. And we used to stand in the middle of the fish market and put up a little station and cook fresh fish there. But the good thing is the Scottish people that came there were always happy to try. You come into the city and people are not happy to try. It's very different because they are pampered, they are spoiled, they are given fish that they want or seafood that they want. But a campaign like that, today we have social media that we did not have when we did all those festivals, chef. We did not even have a mobile phone to go around.
Yeah.
Today we have
Yeah.
that. Why? If I had the opportunity, I would utilize it now more than ever before. And to show people and to tell the fishermen, you bring the fish, we prepare it, we cook it, we sell it, we serve it, and we introduce it to people and say, that's what we should be eating.
Yeah, yeah. And do you notice a difference or change in the demand? And would people pay more? Do you feel people would pay more if they thought if it was sustainable and you were looking after it and buying it from sustainable sources?
The right people will pay more, chef. People who want cheap, cheerful are never going to pay more. But the right people will pay because they will understand, and they will understand the sourcing behind it. And that is the greatest challenge you have in today's current situation, where everything has suddenly become too expensive. Cost of living has gone up, everything has gone up. It's become extremely difficult to make more demands on people. But there are always people willing to pay for eating the right kind of food as well. And I think if it is well marketed and sold properly, we will succeed. Giving you a small example, when we first came into living in Britain, in East London, in the 90s, outside certain pubs here, there used to be a cart coming in the evening with cockles and whelks and all of that. There is not a single one there today. Not a single one. And you cannot get this seafood anymore. So where are they going? Where is all that seafood going? It is still out there because either it's not being harvested or it's being exported because the outside world loves that seafood. But here it's changed. Life has changed. The demand has changed. I mean, I know I was never a fan of jelly deal, for example, but the last typical East London jellied eel shop, Fuchs and Co., established in the 1700s, is now gone. It's gone.
Wow.
It was down the road from us, not far from here. We live in Hackney. It's gone.
Uh-huh.
After 200-300 years of the same family, generation to generation to generation, pie, mash, jelly deal, gone. Because people's perceptions have changed, people's ideologies have changed, people's demands have changed, and jelly deal has been given such a bad reputation that people won't touch it. But then you could have different kinds of eel. Smoked eel, fabulous. Baked eel, roasted eel, superb. I know eel is in short supply, but it's coming back. There is eel now in the waters of the Thames because one of the birds in front of our restaurant are catching them. I see them. And so they're coming back slowly. The Thames is much cleaner now than it ever was before.
Is that the silver eel?
We are further down. So we had the other day, there was a salmon caught. Okay. And I asked Mike, I said, Mike, can a salmon actually come up in this river? He's saying, yes, it can. Originally, they did. Before the water was so bad, they wouldn't come up the Thames. But you're lucky that they come up now, because that means that they are coming upstream now. So there is a change, there is a certain change, but the more there is an emphasis on making sure that the waters are kept clean, the better it is. People need to stop dumping stuff everywhere. I have got videos of amount of plastic in the water outside our restaurants sometimes. It's just disgusting. Why?
Yeah.
Are we such a careless country now that we don't care about our own environment? We don't think about our future. We just chuck things everywhere we feel like. And that has to have a detrimental effect on everything around us.
Well,
Which
it
is
is,
why,
but
of course, I work very actively. No, which is why I'm one of the ocean's ambassadors for the Marine Conservation Society. We try and raise money so we can put it into young people going on the beaches, picking up all the trash, collecting the trash, the washed up fishing nets or whatever there is. And I think that is something that everybody needs to get behind that. Because if you want a cleaner Britain, if you want a future for the children that are growing up in this country, more emphasis has to be put on that. And education, of course.
Cyrus, when you're mentioning the MCS again, one of the things that I feel, I wonder if maybe they could be, in some way, they could come closer to the industry, because one of the things that the fishing industry feels a doubt about, don't know.
Yeah.
Probably they don't
Yeah.
know rather than understand. But the traffic light system, because red,
Yeah.
don't eat any, amber, eat it in moderation, and green is good to go. You can eat, but
Yeah.
the feeling in the industry in general is that fish conservation is more complex. They're not critical of it, but it's more complex than just taking it down to 3 colors.
Yeah.
Would you have a
So
view of that?
I have heard, yeah, I have heard that from many fishermen, and Mike himself has told me this on many occasions. And I have actually discussed that sometimes with the people in the society. That why not, if there are trawlers out there happy to take people on board out on a day fishing or 2-day fishing or 3-day, people who study these waters, people who are there when the haul is being taken in, to actually be on boat, understanding what the fisherman sees. Because today they've got sonar, they've got radar, they've got all sorts of things that tell them where the fish are under the water as well. And that is a study. So when you spoke about this some time ago, about the Norwegians now having their own vessels rather than going out with the fishermen, I think instead of reinventing the wheel, they need to go back to the original wheel. So if there are scientists providing data to the MCS, then those scientists need to be on board certain vessels, going out with the fishing community, and then making an assessment, and then at the same time comparing that with scientific data and coming up with the right answers. Because when you're out there 24 hours a day, through the darkness, through the warnings, through the afternoons, looking at the ocean, they know better than anybody else. They know better. And I think sometimes there are many, many things across all industries that deal with food, that sometimes the very skill that people honed over generations and generations are being lost because of this problem. And because a young boy, when he's 14, 15, on his school holidays, his father would have taken him on his stroller, making sure that the child is safe. He is not going to be hurt or injured or whatever. Yes, injuries will happen, but he's bred and he's instructed and he's told. That young man grows up to appreciate everything, from the dangers of the sea to what the ocean provides. Sustainability, it provides sustenance, it provides livelihood, and it provides an everlasting continuity of a profession. And I think this, yes, I'm very happy. I'm happy to write. If you want to exchange some information with me, I'll be more than happy to share it with them again. Because I hear this time and time again that there is a difference between what is proposed and what is actual. But the amber, the green, amber, and red are an easy way for people to ascertain and understand. It's because it has become the benchmark for people to understand. From childhood to cross a road, to food now, to supermarkets. There is a email that I subscribe to, comes every day to me, and it is about various things on sustainability of food, the food chain, etc., etc., etc. It's called the food service footprint. And there is so much confusion. People want to buy something in a supermarket, they still don't understand what is on that label because everything is confused. And so I'm not surprised if red, amber, and green is confusion as well. Sometimes it is right, sometimes it may not be absolutely right. Sometimes data is updated, but data is not updated on a very regular basis. It's done about 2 or 3 times a year, rather than being done maybe involving fishermen on the committee or involving people that have more understanding of the seas on the committee. I don't know. I am not a magician to give those answers, Chef, but I'm very happy for people to be given more information, because the more the information people have and the voice, I think the fishermen don't have a voice. They need to have a voice. The sheep farmers are suffering the same way. They don't have a bigger voice. Everyone's complaining. Animal husbandry complaining. And this thing about beef cattle being more harmful and more releasing of greenhouse gases than other things. There is always a plus and a minus side to that. And I think the human being is not given the right information sometimes.
I love your logic. It's just talk about, it's the epitome of keep it simple. And one of the things that you take to my mind when you were talking there about the scientists and that, the danger we have is, and I'm not taking sides. Both sides have a problem. Scientists and fishermen, they don't trust each other.
But if fishermen became the scientists,
if they got out together, just what you're saying there, and going back to just talk together, go out together, I think that would make a massive contribution.
Have more discussions, because the word that we use as chefs many a times is KISS, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And I think the most important thing is KISS, rather than giving it complication. And the idea is keeping it complicated so everybody is confused. It keeps people in jobs, but it doesn't do any social justice at the end of the day. And I think there are so many people you meet, and we talk to so many people, thanks to, of course, me going around and meeting and chatting with people, that I am privileged. I have a little bit more knowledge than other people do. And I'm grateful for that.
I agree that you have more knowledge, but that's the fact you're interested and want to know more.
But it's our duty. We feed people, Chef. We feed people. And if we destroy that and everybody buys cheap rubbish all the time, then what are we encouraging? And this is the dilemma we face today, because the public demands cheaper food, not knowing that they are actually damaging themselves by wanting everything cheap. It's become a habit for many people, particularly amongst the wider Asian community, for example, because they always compare to what they can do for a few pounds as compared to what you will sell for a few more pounds. But you forget that you are not putting into your system the stuff that the body needs to put into its system. And I think these are messages that need to go out. And the fact that schools are no longer teaching home science, for example, cooking, for example. Why do we have a nation full of obese and unhealthy people when there is so much out there that is good for the body? And it's all about education. It's all about cost. It's all about everything else. Everything is driven by those things, unfortunately. And it doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to have good food to make it expensive. You can eat less of very good food, but you can eat good quality and make it better for yourself. You can buy different kinds of marine food that are cheaper to buy, but actually they're more wholesome. They're full of more nutrition. But do we do it? I don't know. It's a problem. You have a problem. We need to solve that if we can.
You know, when you're mentioning there about the different species, it reminds me quite often I used to find there was actually an almost like a marketing opportunity for us with the restaurant, because we would be, if it was landed, the only fish it would have in the menu was what was landed in Scrabster. If it wasn't landed in Scrabster, it didn't go into our menu, and we would just explain that. But also, maybe a boat was in deeper water and he had different fish. It wasn't just exactly what you're saying. People didn't know it, maybe wasn't educated. And I used to, some of the waiting staff, the servers would come through and so and so on table, say 5, never heard of that fish before. And I used to say to them, don't worry, because the next time they see it on our menu, they'll remember where they got it the first time.
Yes, true. But also, I mean, you have the opportunity to go and speak to the people, make them understand. At least try it. Give it a shot. If it is not worth cooking, I will not cook it myself anyway.
When you're talking about cooking anyway, I always see you as the absolute master of spice. What do you think of the Western world? Still underestimating the use of spices, using them properly?
I think the Western world is learning fast, particularly Britain. We are in a very lucky part of the world because there is more understanding of the use of spices in Britain than anywhere else outside of the countries that actually live on spice all the time. And the British public is learning more and more and being a little bit more creative with the use of spices. I think more people now understand the medicinal benefits of spices as well. They understand that it is beneficial. But again, people think that you chuck everything into a pot, that's how they should be cooking. And when they come for the classes, oh, you only put 3 things in. I said, yeah, because it's something different. I don't have to put 25 things in to get one kind of flavor. It's the same whether you're using 2 herbs or using 5 herbs. When it's needed for 5 herbs, use 5 herbs. When you need to use maybe just parsley or thyme or whatever, you only use parsley or thyme. And it's the same that applies to spices. And I think the British public is very receptive today, very, very receptive, very open. The knowledge is increasing all the time. They're reading a lot. And also that they are trying a lot. They're cooking a lot because we know that we sell spices ourselves because we source them properly. Then we make our own combinations and we sell them online. And there is more of an opportunity, more people buying now than before. That's because they want to try with the food. They want to try different things out. And I'm very pleased to see that. Actually, very happy to see that, really. Turmeric, now you don't have to sell to people that turmeric is good for health. Sometimes they overuse it or they use too much of it and then say it didn't taste very good. Naturally, no one asks you to douse the whole thing in turmeric. You have to use what you have to use, what right quantity you need to use. So I think people are learning, and I'm very, very pleased that a lot more people are taking interest in it.
One of the things that anytime I'm talking about spices with anybody, it comes to my mind is in your restaurant and a dish. Now, you'll remember the dish, maybe you still do it. It was scallops, and you had 2, I think would it be maybe cumin and coriander? And I think
Yes.
it was, but and to me, there were strong flavors. And I thought, my goodness, this will be interesting. But I have to say, I could still taste the scallop. It was amazing.
And I think that's the beauty of using spice, chef. You have to use just the right quantity and just the right balance. So it's all about understanding, because you're cooking something that is so delicate as a product, as a marine product. You could easily smother it and destroy it. But it is a fine product and you need to do it just about perfectly right. And I think it worked very well with the scallops. We sold many of those. And your good friend from the Isle of Mull used to sell me those scallops, hand dived. What was his name, Pervin? Our man from Isle of Mull. We used to buy scallops from him. I forget his name. I used to call him the Sultan. Guy Greaves.
Yeah.
Guy Greaves. And Guy did a lot of hard work to stop dredging around the islands, because it was decimating everything else along with it. And he was not well liked by the other people. But they managed to safeguard the waters, and then you got the best quality scallops coming out of those waters. And I think that's what makes a big difference, like the stuff that you got. And it is just that what the ocean has produced, man should not destroy that. Man needs to work in tandem with nature always. But when you have a product, and if I destroy it by overspicing it, what's the point of buying it? I'm only overspicing it because I'm trying to hide something. And that could be that the fish is not as fresh as it should be.
It's interesting when different things you say, and it reminds me of other things. You mentioned there about working with fishermen, work with nature. They never work against her. They never work against Mother Nature.
Yeah.
They work with her. They have to.
They have to. It's their livelihood.
Yeah.
It's their livelihood.
But
and which is what they need to express more. They need to express it more. The greedy ones, the big ones, for them, nature is not important. For them, money is important.
yeah,
Whereas the normal, ordinary father to son to who are born fishermen, to them, everything that nature provides is sustenance for them. And they will not do anything outside that respectable level. That has to be understood.
when you talk about the dredging, in many areas around the coast, Cyrus, what the fishing boats would actually call up the scallop dredgers and tell them, suggest they go and fish an area. They maybe tried it and they've had some scallops in their net, and they would tell the dredgers. The dredgers would work that area, and then the fishermen would go back and catch more fish, because it just turned the dredgers would maybe turn the seabed up a bit, more food available, and fish would be, so they work together.
Oh. All right. Okay. I guess everything is a balance.
That's right. Exactly.
Everything is a balance. Yeah.
Yeah. And the old saying, live and let live.
And we need to keep on with that balance, because that's the balance of nature. You cannot tip it negatively. You got to keep it going positive.
As a fisherman friend often uses the term, can have all the science and all the brains of the world, but nothing can control if Mother Nature decided to throw a curveball.
Yes. And that she does every now and again. Yeah, we call it the googly.
Yeah, googly. That's another term we use. Indeed. If you had to cook a seafood dish, maybe right now, just what's in your fridge, what would you make sure it would be?
I'll tell you what. in the month of December, we went to live with a friend on the Isle of Wight. And just off his house, the fishermen were out in a day boat. And he knew who it was. So he called the guy and he brought some amazing fish home. And we have some lovely skate wing in the freezer. And it was so fresh that we brought. But along with that, of course, we had a couple of breams and a few mackerel as well. So if I was to go into the freezer now and dig it out, it would be skate wing. And I'll tell you what, simple. Garlic, fresh green chili, fresh coriander, butter, chef. Nothing beats that. Just a simple. Because that fish, the flavor I would kill if I overdid it. And a few chili flakes. And it is magical. And just cooked right enough for the flesh to clean off those bones on the wings. And this is a thornback ray. It was a thornback. And small but lovely. Lovely. He cut it in front of us and just gave us the wings. And I said, next time when I have more space in my freezer, I'll take everything, the whole carcass. So we could make great soup out of it or something,
Okay.
And we make a lovely sauce, which is very Parsi from our community. We need good bones for that stock. The thickening agent is rice flour. But the sauce is very delicate. It's only flavored with fresh mint, fresh coriander, ginger, garlic, bit of vinegar, lime juice, and sugar. And that's it. You don't need many more. But you finish it like a fricassee. So then you mount everything up with a couple of eggs. And you got your stock on a rolling boil. Yeah. So when I talk about the rolling boil, no one can see my action. You slowly pour that in and just cohere the sauce and throw in a few half cut or quartered cherry tomatoes. You get a lovely color inside, and then you just dip your fish into it, and it's heaven. It's not overspiced. It's not over. Yes, just there. Simple. So the fish is half poached to get the stock, and then you finish it into the sauce. And that's it. And you cover the pot, you turn it off, and let the heat cook the fish through. No further cooking. Which again, people find it very hard to believe.
Yeah. And so you're talking about a large pot you would use?
If I have a wing, definitely. If I have a small pieces of fish, a small pot.
Okay.
But the last minute fricassee is important, but people are scared to do that. Yeah.
So would you putting it into the pot with the rolling boil and the spices and that, would that be the only cooking it would get?
Well, so you got the stock out, you got all the trimmings from the fish going in first, with a bit of onion, few scraps of carrot, whatever you want to throw inside. Then you strain the stock off. Okay, you strained it off, you brought it to a rolling boil, you got all your mise en place, if your listeners are there, mise en place, prep ready.
Yeah.
Everything chopped, fine ginger, garlic, etc., all ready. And in that, you put that in a bowl, you break your egg into it, rice flour, and beat it up nicely. So it's all cohered well. Then you bring your stock to a rolling boil, poach your fish inside, and take it out, finish the sauce, and leave the fish back inside and cover it. That's it. No further cooking required. It just cooks beautifully. And then when you serve it, you got this lift up from the bottom, pour the sauce over, and what we call khichdi is where the term kejri originally came from. You serve it with a khichdi. So the fish is not cooked in a kejri, it is served with the fish separately. Somehow, the British version ended up cooking the fish with it.
Yeah.
If the fish overcooks, we don't do that. And the khichdi is cooked with lentils and rice together. A nice blob of butter, if you're not scared of butter, a nice blob of butter to seep through like that. Heaven.
Oh, I love butter. I love using butter when cooking seafood, any seafood.
Yes, nothing beats.
That'll be really tasty, but it'll be when you're talking about all that, we'd be talking about what, a minute or two.
Yep. And game over. I did it recently on a video, so it's on my Instagram still. It's called Sasni Machi. I did it with both the prawns that Mike Warner gave me, as well as the fillet of bass, and just to show people how easy it is to make it. So next time you're down, let me know. I'll make some for you.
I certainly fancy that's enough to take me down. To see that, not only taste it, but to watch you make it. That sounds fascinating.
It is. It is really, really tasty.
It almost reminds me
and
of...
the fish
Carry on.
reminds you of... Sorry, I cut you in.
I was going to say...
I said the fish makes a big difference.
What I was going to say reminds me of when you're saying that you would put them in together. When I was a child, our parents and grandparents and that, the herring, they would salt it in the season, and then over the winter months and that, they would have it, and they would put a salt herring in with potatoes, and the salt from the herring was the salt that the potatoes got.
And what's happened to the herring fleet today, chef? It's virtually non-existent because the British public are not eating enough herring.
You know, going on from that, Cyrus, an interesting podcast I've done recently with a nutritionist. She's a Dutch woman in the University of Aberdeen, and she reckons that it's not her theories, it's proved fact that there's more nutrition from using fresh local seafood rather than importing it. And we export, as you said earlier, we export so much of our fish and import. We're net importers. So she says we're putting all that valuable nutritions and the multi-nutrients and things that our body needs.
Yeah.
We're just giving them away.
Yes, like I said before. And we are importing crab meat from as far away as Indonesia. And there's blue swimmer crab from the Far East because it's got more nice chunky meat coming. But we will export 10 times that and let somebody else enjoy the benefit of fresh meat. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely crazy. Yeah. Where can our listeners follow you online, Cyrus? You say you were on Instagram.
Well, they can follow me on Instagram. Cyrus Todiwala is good enough. So online, on Instagram, I do bits and pieces. But if the listeners follow me on that and they push me a little bit, I'll do some more videos with seafood. And that would be really interesting. And hopefully show them easier recipes to cook. Very typical seafood, Indian style, without much complication. And I think that's the most important message we need to give people, not to get complicated when we cook food, particularly when it's fish, because we need to keep the balance, the delicacy, the proteins, and everything else to keep it as easy to digest as the body demands. Prawns, for example, people cook prawns till they bounce on your table like rubber balls. And when you tell them, just bring the sauce to a boil, chuck the prawns inside, cover the lid and switch it off. Leave it for 5 minutes. Let the latent heat cook the shellfish inside. It'll be beautiful, succulent, juicy, and soft. And I think it's only when you can talk like that that people appreciate what you're doing. They're still scared because they think they're eating a raw prawn, but they're not.
Another thing I feel people are a wee bit unsure of, and I quite often would say it to people, is just remember your food your bit of fish goes on the plate. It goes from the plate to the table. It's still cooking.
Still cooking. It's still cooking. Carry over cooking. Until it reaches you, it's still cooking. Yeah.
Well, Cyrus, I think we'll fold up because that's been so interesting. I'm delighted what you said about the spices. I was absolutely looking forward to asking you that.
Thank you very much, sir. It's been a pleasure chatting with you too.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.